Hello, and welcome to Learning from Nature, the biomimicry podcast with me, your host, Lily Ehrman. This is the first episode back after quite a long break. It's been a pretty exciting season of transition over here. I recently began a new position at the Biomimicry Institute. This organization has been doing incredible work in the nature-inspired space at so many levels, and I'm honored to join the team. My specific role is the Ask Nature Hive Technical Manager, so I'll be working closely on expanding the asknature.org site and building and engaging the community on the Hive. I'm still only a month in, but I can already say I'm looking forward to being part of their major impact in the biomimicry world and beyond. Anyway, today's episode is with a friend and fellow biomimic. Andrew is an ever-curious scientist and educator with a passion for green and regenerative chemistry. He graduated from Purdue University with a bachelor's in interdisciplinary chemistry, earned his master's in biomimicry from Arizona State University, and is a member of the 6th Biomimicry Professional Cohort. His professional experiences include scientific research in the fields of nanotechnology and water quality assurance chemistry, directing educational programs and piloting curriculum innovation, consulting with both the Biomimicry Institute and Biomimicry 3.8, and he's starting his own biochemistry consulting firm called Chemulate. He's an avid scuba diver, birder, skateboarder, and loves playing music and being outdoors in his free time. Let's jump on in.
I'm Andrew Meador, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a scientist, educator, musician, scuba diver, skateboarder, nature enthusiast, and I really just love learning and doing new things.
Welcome. Yeah, I've been meaning to have this conversation with you for a while now, and it's really exciting to be able to jump into some of these deeper biomimicry topics.
I'm very excited. I love talking chemistry, biochemistry, biomimicry. So yeah.
Yeah, and we've done one episode with John Warner kind of on overview of green chemistry, but I think chemistry is so important and interesting and in depth. Like there's so many angles we can take it for biomimicry. So I'm excited to kind of dive deeper with you, pun intended. And I'm going to start out with a really light question. How must we as humans live in harmony and adapt to live in harmony on this earth? It's a scary time on many levels. And so this is, I think, a good question just to set the framework for what is your belief for how we are going to approach that pathway?
Yeah. So I think obviously in context, my interest is going to focus on chemistry. I think in general, when we look out in the world, I think we can just be better roommates, right? We're constantly leaving dirty dishes in the sink. We're not putting things back where we found them. That metaphor can go a lot of ways. It can be stretched in some silly ways. But in general, I think we just have so much more room for growth in our understanding of what it means to be good neighbors on Earth. It's just as simple as that. Everything from pesticides and manufacturing products to the food that we're eating, to the garments that we're wearing, every part of our lives is affected by chemistry. And I'm very hopeful because not only is the Western world waking up to biomimicry and starting to learn from nature, we also have so many brilliant people working on these challenges, starting companies and tackling these problems head on. So I think for me, I always want to finish with that optimism, that sweet aftertaste of hope. Because in reality, what we're going through is really hard. This is really bitter. To see the destruction of our Earth, to see the ways in which chemical toxicity is affecting our ecosystems and human health. And this sackcloth that we're wearing in protestation is starting to get really itchy right now. But when we take a moment to reframe, there is so much to give us hope. And I feel like there's a lot happening that we can't see. Kind of like, I'm from the Midwest. So I think of dormant cicadas coming up from their 17-year cycle, slowly crawling to the surface. And they're going to be everywhere. Just like these green chemistry innovations are going to be popping up everywhere. And there's nowhere you won't be able to look without seeing them. And chemistry-wise, what we're seeing right now is that our technological advancements with nanoscale precise chemical manufacturing, they are enabling us to live in greater harmony on Earth because we can practice more effective green chemistry and apply life's principles in a way that we've never seen before. Technologically, we've never been equipped to be able to. So, yeah, we have a lot of room for improvement. And we're also aware of that, and we're starting to work on it.
Yeah, I love that. And reframing from this is devastating, which it is. And I think that's important to hold close, but also there's so much opportunity for us to be better. And I like how Janine says, I've mentioned this many times on the podcast, but just we're a young species, right? I think framing it that way is helpful for me of like, oh yeah, we're pretty new here and we have a lot to learn from those other organisms around us.
Yeah, and with that young species analogy, I love it. I just gave this example at my Confluence talk, but we're like little kids trying to pour milk into a glass, and we're spilling a ton of milk. And the kid is not intrinsically evil for doing that. You know, they might be bad at accomplishing tasks, but in general, we simply lack the coordination and the musculature to be able to precisely do these things. But we're growing, we're developing as a species, and we've got to do that through practice, right? There's so much in the chemical industry right now that's going on, and it's just because that's the quickest, the easiest, the first way that we could figure out how to get it done. And that means, you know, what we see is there's a lot of waste. There's so much pollution, so many byproducts that we can't reuse. And that is not the circular economy that we want, right? But now we're like, oh, we're able to dive deeper into the nature of chemistry and understand at a molecular level what nature is doing and how we can emulate that. So it's just that we're like little kids right now trying to pour a glass of milk, and we're building those muscles. Like in industry, we're building those muscles right now. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I love that visual when you shared it at the Confluence of just like this little kid with milk spilt everywhere. And it's like, oh yeah, that's us. And we have, yeah, it's only going to get better from here, hopefully.
We have to run reactions at much higher temperatures and sometimes much lower temperatures than what exists ambiently on Earth. And with pressure too, we use a lot of pressurization that doesn't exist naturally in living things when they're doing chemistry. And it can take a lot of energy to create those pressurized environments and those heated or cooled environments, especially if we're doing things in a vacuum, like supercomputers. Quantum computing is taking place at temperatures near absolute zero, which is the removal of all heat altogether, like period. And that takes a lot of energy to remove heat and gas from those processes. And so just the simple principle of doing reactions at ambient temperatures and pressures is such an aspirational goal for us in the chemical industry. And that's one way, like, because of that, because of how that system is integrated, it's integrated with fossil fuels being burned to create energy. It's being integrated with waste management to manage the byproducts of those reactions. There's a very significant portion of sustainability's success that hinges on the chemical industry really learning these life-friendly principles and mastering them in practice.
Mm. And it's in nature, seemingly a very simple, elegant process, but it's actually so complex that we really haven't gotten it figured out at all, which is humbling, deeply humbling. You actually mentioned something that I'd love to back up and explore a little bit more before I jump into my next question, which is nanoscale technologies. I think this is something I've mentioned in the podcast before, but folks might not be familiar with that term or that word. And I'd love to have you explain that and talk a bit more about what you meant when you said that technology is like really expanding right now.
Yeah, so really quick from my pedigree, my background, I'm trained as a chemist and I worked in nanotechnology research for 3 years. It was chemical nanotechnology. It was a lab that was contracted for work with the International Space Station by NASA. I was using self-assembly protocols with metal ions and imaging individual strands of DNA using an atomic force microscope as part of this work. So it was super cool, super nerdy, Nanotechnology is my bread and butter. I love it. When we think about nature's chemistry, there's all this biomimicry shop talk that we could throw out, like, nature builds from the bottom up, or nature employs elegant processes. There's a lot of taking a bigger material and carving it down when we manufacture something. But nature is so elegant and efficient in its nanoscale manufacturing. It's building molecule by molecule, piece by piece, and nothing is wasted. And sometimes that means slower. Sometimes that means faster than human manufacturing can accomplish. But in general, the efficiency and the functionality of natural materials far outpaces our own synthetic capabilities because nature's able to create it at such a fine, precise scale, like that molecular scale. And right now, as humans, we don't have the ability to just build a molecule atom by atom or to manufacture a polymer and, be able to place this atom here and this atom there, or to reach in and insert a nitrogen atom in the middle of a molecule. Right now, we have to try and leverage these natural laws of chemistry and physics, these self-assembly protocols that are happening at scales that are much larger than molecules, that are much larger than we need to be able to precisely manufacture and get these benefits of being able to create like nature does. So, yeah, there's a discrepancy in our ability to precisely manufacture like nature does because our hands just aren't small enough, so to speak.
And then, yeah, I think I'm just processing because there's a lot of info. And it's fascinating to me, especially as somebody who doesn't have a chemistry background but is interested in chemistry. What about where we're at right now is hopeful for you? Like the nanoscale technology, laser engraving, is that a thing?
So if we look at nanostructures, nanostructures themselves are incredibly functional, simple geometric shapes. They're achieving functional outcomes, whereas right now with most of our designs, with human technical manufacturing, we're creating synthetic, oftentimes toxic chemicals that are applied to a surface or applied to a product that accomplish the same function that these, benign nanoscale structures could achieve. So instead of using simple nanostructures, we're applying chemical layers. So there are some innovations that are being advanced, and that gives me hope, especially
Mhm.
with this laser technology, because it's eliminating harsh chemical treatments and more so leveraging physics via functional shape.
Jumping into this next question that I think links what we were just talking about to a term that I really love that you introduced at the Learn Biomimicry Confluence last week. And one of nature's unifying principles is, there's nothing wasted. Nature recycles everything, it uses locally available materials. How can we begin to learn from some of those strategies at the chemical level? And this term you threw out was bioalchemy. So, what is bioalchemy and what does it mean to learn from some of those strategies?
Yeah, I think for me as a chemist, alchemy is sometimes viewed as this archaic science where people were really motivated and went crazy trying to turn everything into gold. And there's such a big economic component to that. Gold is such an interesting cultural phenomenon in terms of chemistry and economies and human society. But when I say bioalchemy, what I really mean is just this elegant, magical chemistry. Really, when it's juxtaposed with, human industrial manufacturing. So it's sleight of hand happening at the molecular scale that just wows you. You know, Conservation of mass still exists, right? Atoms are not simply popping in and out of existence. But when you look at this, it's so astounding. It's so mesmerizing because it feels like a magic trick. It feels like sleight of hand, especially compared to, like I said, human industrial manufacturing processes. Like, what do you mean there's no waste? Everything's being used, everything's being put to like practical use and accomplishing this functional output. Everything's reusable in the system. There's just so much awe and wonder that I experience, and a lot of beauty comes from learning about these biochemical processes, learning from them how we could emulate the magic that's happening in nature and how we can impart that to our own designs.
Are you excited about the potential of biomimicry and want to begin your own journey in this field? Take the short course set from Learn Biomimicry and kickstart a nature-inspired future. Use my code LEARNINGFROMNATURE, that's all one word with no spaces, to save $60 when you purchase the Biomimicry short course set. Just head over to learnbiomimicry.com/learningfromnature. I love that you mentioned awe and wonder too, because I love that analogy, especially because the scientific world is often seen as this like right brain versus left brain. It's very divided. It has to be, especially Western science, has to be in this category, in this way, and we have to separate our emotions from it. But that's not the case at all when you actually look at nature and get inspired by nature. And I think hopefully, a lot of our future involves more of a bridge between the two, because our awe and our wonder and our inspiration is so directly linked to our observation of the world at all these different scales and how we want to borrow those lessons. And I'd love for you to give some examples of organisms that are champions of bioalchemy. You gave a couple at the Learn Biomimicry Confluence. Maybe you can jump into here that I was very fascinated by. I had never heard of them. So I'm excited to hear you talk about them a little bit more.
Yeah, so let me talk about one of my favorites right now. I mean, it's always rotating, right? You always learn something new and amazing. Especially with my scuba diving, there's always a new creature that I'm researching or something new to learn about. And I want to say that I'm very deeply ingrained in science, in reality, but I do also love science fiction. And so there's this beautiful mixing of worlds to play with both of those. And there's the practical and the fantastical. And I love that. And I love that aspect of biomimicry that is, you're imagining something applied in a new way. It's creative, it's imaginative, it's fun. It feels fun to think about those things. So one of those animals that makes me feel that way is the volcano snail. It's got my favorite scientific name, Chrysomelon squamiferum. It's a deep sea snail. It lives thousands of feet underwater around hydrothermal vents. And it takes a harmful byproduct that's produced in its gut and it turns it into an iron shell. So this is the only animal that we know of, especially a snail, that has a frickin' metal shell. And it has metal armor plates on its soft body too. It's incredible. I just want to feel the shell so bad. I want to feel the heft of its weight in my hand. So this byproduct comes from bacteria that live in its gut. It's got these little bacteria buddies that live in its stomach, and they produce food, but they also produce this sulfur byproduct that's harmful to the snail. So what the snail does is it uses local ingredients from its environment, which is iron and heavy metals coming out of the hydrothermal vents underwater. It takes that iron, it mixes it with the sulfur to make this beautiful black pyrite shell. And so that's where the bioalchemy comes in, is a bit of a quip, because pyrite is full of gold. So there's the gold connection. But it also creates these other molecules out of iron and sulfur, like greigite. And it turns this harmful, life-threatening substance in its stomach into a barrier of protection in this beautiful, elegant chemical process. Like I said, sleight of hand, it's bioalchemy. And we're still trying to figure out what are the exact details of that process and how the snail is building these iron compounds in ambient conditions. It fills me with so much awe to know that this creature exists. And especially for ocean conservation efforts, it's important to talk about life in the deep sea because it brings that ecosystem to front of mind. And in the biomimicry sense, we need these organisms to teach us about life-friendly chemistry, including the energy efficiency components of chemistry. And there's another animal that I love, and it's a bird called the anhinga. It's also called the darter in other parts of the world. And it's the only bird that we know of that has specialized scalloped wavy feathers. And it has these specialized feathers, and it's like a Lay's potato chip. That's what I mean when I say scalloped. It's wavy. They have a rigid surface, but are curved in this repeating pattern. And the curved sections are thought to increase the surface area. So it's leveraging surface tension in the water while it's hunting, while it's swimming. So that's a cool thing about this bird. But this bird also has really cool community connections. So this bird builds its nest high in the trees and swamps, and it turns its bird poop into bodyguards. So because the bird's nest high in the trees over water, and it doesn't want to poop in the nest, right? So often it poops in the water beneath the nest. That causes bacteria to start to accumulate around the nitrogen and the other nutrients that it got rid of by disposing its waste. Oh, and quick side note, because we're talking about waste. When we talk about waste in nature, it's so much different than waste in our human society or in a landfill. We use the term waste because in nature it's no longer useful to that specific organism. It's been processed and discarded. So they process it, they're moving on with it, but it becomes circular because nature plays well with itself, creates conditions conducive to life. So it's always passing on those nutrients in a way that they're available to the next organism or to the next neighbor. So yeah, just to clarify those terms, waste is such a big part of our human lives, and we can easily just become too familiar with it and project our terminology onto nature in incorrect ways.
Yeah. No, that was great. And even the term waste is like it is waste the best term, but here I think it's helpful because we know what it means in our world, but yeah, it can be a bridge to a greater understanding of there is no waste in nature. So is that term even applicable? Anyway, side note.
Yeah, we use that term because of our conditioning in our context in human society, right?
Right.
This is our culture that we're imparting onto other species in nature. So the bird poops, bacteria start to gather around those bioavailable nutrients. That gathers fish and that brings alligators. And so the alligators are around these anhinga nests, which are being protected from the raccoons that would pilfer the eggs and otherwise just help keep the babies safe in the nest. So the alligators are getting free lunch, the fish are coming to them. And so, where in human society are we turning that sort of wasteful byproduct that we don't need anymore into communal relationships, into connections? And don't get me wrong, it's not like nature is all sunshine and rainbows. You know, it's not like the anhinga and the alligator are best friends. Let's not go that far. But there is a system in place where, like I said, the chemistry, all of the ingredients are playing nice with themselves across these different species, and the byproducts of one organism actually are usable by others. So there's bacteria, birds, fish, reptiles. There's other players in that chain too. And that's just an incredible, simple example of how nature turns waste into something valuable at the next step. And it's because of how that waste is built. Like fundamentally, the waste is able to be processed because the other players in that ecosystem have the enzymes, they have the mechanical, chemical means to use that waste, to use those chemical shapes, those chemical arrangements. And our waste is just so different. The big problem with our waste is that it locks up the atoms and the molecules and the nutrients that are used in it. So it's not available to the rest of those players in the ecosystem.
Yeah. And such a good reminder that like mutualistic relationships are everywhere around us. And there's all these different levels to them, which I think is also this like interconnected piece of ecosystem engineering and understanding ecosystem relationships and food webs. It's just endlessly complex and all connected in ways that sometimes we can't even understand or fathom. Nature's cool. And what you said about the snail too, like I always say nature is metal because it's, you know, ruthless to a certain degree. But now I have an example for nature is actually metal. And using those waste products or quote unquote waste products to create a useful material, that's really hopeful to me because I think we're at this precipice of we have so many waste materials in every sector in society. How do we as a society, as maybe smaller groups of individuals in different countries, like how are we tackling those waste streams and making them useful beyond the landfill? I think that's one of our massive challenges moving forward because there's an existing collection of waste that we're going to have to deal with, and the systems in place that we already have for manufacturing, transport, production involve a lot of waste, and that's continuing to happen. So how do we shift the systems, and how do we use what's already waste? I think that's a big question that I have for biomimicry in general, is like, how do we use this lens to solve that? We've talked a lot about biomimicry and bioalchemy and green chemistry. I'd love to have you give a bit more of like a personal connection to why you practice biomimicry and what that means.
So, to give a really quick version, I've always loved nature. Like, spent time in a creek growing up, surrounded by trees in my backyard, playing with the fish, the tadpoles, the insects, the frogs, the little snapping turtles. Ah, so many good memories. But then as I grew up, I became acclimated to the built environment, living in cities, like growing up in Indianapolis, Indiana, being isolated from, quote, the wild, living separated from nature, feeling like, oh, okay, I'm subconsciously buying into this idea that humans are other than, the superiority of humanity. And, I think there's some clarity for us as humans in that idea. I also think there's a lot of harm that's been done when those thoughts remain unchallenged, or if we're not curious about what that's saying about our place and our interactions on Earth. So I was a scientist, nanotechnology, doing my thing, worked in water quality chemistry too, spending a lot of time in a lab. And biomimicry kind of gave me it completed me in a sense. I really feel like that because I was studying nature. I was working with nature, performing these chemical and biological tests on water, but really I was distant. I was so unconnected to nature. And I'm really grateful to biomimicry for reconnecting me in a meaningful and life-giving way. Even just as through as simple a process as explicitly defining reconnection as a core principle of practicing biomimicry. If I had just stayed in a chemistry lab, I don't think I would have gotten that on my own. Sure, like I still loved watching, Animal Planet and nature documentaries and those things, but it's so different connecting with nature through a screen. And so, yeah, I just don't think I would have gotten that on my own, especially not from the chemical industry. And to me, biomimicry is so much fun because it's so interdisciplinary. It's chock full of potential leverage points to better the world, to exert our creativity towards mutual flourishing, and in collaboration with these animals and the nature that we're studying, in collaboration with humans and different disciplines. I love that. Like, I need a lot of intellectual stimulation in my day to feel like I'm engaged meaningfully and feel like I'm involved in things that matter to me. And biomimicry is perfectly suited for that and for these pursuits, the green chemistry pursuits that I cared very deeply about.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear a little bit more of like where you're at right now with practicing biomimicry and kind of career wise, like how folks can learn about the work you do or get involved in the things that you're offering.
Yeah, plain and simple, I love chemistry. I love solving problems and especially applying science to real world challenges, just like practicing biomimicry empowers us to do. I have a background in chemistry, science, and education and research. And so I'm starting this thing called Cumulate. It's my own avenue for this work. I'm really interested in exploring how nature's chemistry could inform our own industrial manufacturing practices. So, looking at what is the gap between the present, modern, current state of the art manufacturing practices and materials and chemical manufacturing, and how many steps away is it from how nature does chemistry? And how could nature as a model, nature as a measure for our success be applied to solve those challenges? I'm currently working on, writing up a framework and publishing that. And in the meantime, I'm continuing to do education work. That's writing curriculum, it's teaching, and I'm also doing some industry consulting.
Awesome. And then last question that I ask pretty much everybody. What is giving you hope right now?
Like I shared before, I have a lot of hope, even just at a distance, because I'm constantly seeing new companies pop up that are focused on green chemistry, sustainability, regenerative practices. And maybe they don't even know what biomimicry is, but they're doing biomimicry work, which is super cool. Maybe they're creating sustainable materials, or they're working to move humanity forward into this new high-tech, high-nature future where we're considering the implications of our crude practices, how we can improve them, and how we can turn and move past those days. But just to get a little more personal, I rely so much on my partner and having meaningful friendships, having meaningful relationships in my life. People that deeply know me and are deeply known by me. There's a lot of big feelings right now about these challenges, and there's a lot of uncertainty politically, socially. And I maintain my hope because I have those people in my life that I can talk to and trust and confide in, and we can support each other, build each other up, and just help each other keep going.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I totally agree. I think that the relationship piece is really, really crucial. It's always been crucial, but especially at this moment, the relationships, the friendships, the connections, the community, holding each other close is crucial. I appreciate you all for listening in today and for being a part of this beautiful web of change makers across the globe. I'm excited to continue to share my own journey and invite guests that inspire us and give us a greater sense of curiosity for our genius world. This is a quick reminder that we have some really awesome nature nerd merch like shirts and stickers so you can help support the podcast and look cool on your next hike. These were custom designed by my friend and incredible artist, Sarah Williams, and they showcase the amazing range of unique organisms here on Earth. You can grab yours at learningfromnature.earth/merch. I also want you all to know how much I appreciate every review, rating, recommendation, and support as you are all helping biomimicry reach more people. Together, we can not only imagine, but create a beautiful world with life at the forefront and guiding the way. This episode was brought to you by Learn Biomimicry. If you're wanting to start your own biomimicry journey, they have a special offer for my listeners. I've known about Learn Biomimicry for ages and actually was a mentor for one of their programs briefly a few years ago. I've seen firsthand the impact it can have on folks. This is your chance to better understand biomimicry in just 3 short courses, all with the depth of a degree and the ease of a TED Talk. Today, Learn Biomimicry has helped more than 1,679 learners from over 41 countries practice biomimicry in their personal and professional lives. They've brought biomimicry to every continent, with the exception of Antarctica, although that could change, you never know. All my listeners save $60 when you purchase the Biomimicry Short Course Set. There's also a free ebook to get you started. Use the coupon code LEARNINGFROMNATURE with no spaces, or head to www.learnbiomimicry.com/learningfromnature. That's all one word. www.learnbiomimicry.com/learningfromnature. Happy learning!